Welcome to this week's OIS Podcast. Last week, we heard about the presbyopia drop from Lens Therapeutics that's moving into phase 3 trials. This week, we hear about another contender, this one from Visus Therapeutics. Listen to the conversation with host Dr. Ehsan Sadri and Visus CEO Ben Bergo. Ehsan, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Ehsan Sadri, board certified ophthalmologist. I'm here in Newport Beach, and I'm really excited about my next guest, who is CEO and really the executive director and CEO of Visus. His name is Ben Bergo, and he's joining us right now in the middle of a Delta COVID increase. As you don't know what the company is in the presbyopic space, and they have a product, prescription eye drop, being studied for correction of loss of near vision. So with that said, I'm super excited. How are you doing, Ben?
Really, really well. And thank you for that introduction. And thank you for having me on today. And as you said, so Visus Therapeutics is a clinical stage company, and we have a lead program in presbyopia, as you mentioned. We have some other assets in the company that we're working on that are preclinical, but a lot of the focus at the moment for the business is on presbyopia and taking our 2 lead candidates through this phase 2 we're in now and moving quickly into our phase 3 studies later this year. So very excited with the progress we've made and what's to come.
Yeah, so I'd love to dive into Visus. And for those of you who don't know, super exciting, huge market, big unmet need. Just for me as an ophthalmologist, super excited because now we have therapies that we never had, and there weren't surgical therapies. But before we get to that, I want to dive in a little bit about Ben's background. Ben, you've had obviously an enormous experience in life sciences. Before you were executive VP of Planet Innovation. And, you were doing a lot of MMA activity, and then you were at NOLA Therapeutics. Tell us a little about your background. Where were you raised? Tell us, I already know this, but for those of you who don't know, tell us your background, right. And then tell us your work experience.
Sure. Yeah, so obviously, I'm not from around these parts. You can obviously hear from my accent. So born and raised in Australia, in Melbourne. And spent the first, 30 years or so of my life in Melbourne, and studied engineering and finance through college, and then worked at a company in Melbourne that developed a range of diagnostic platforms and instruments and antibody products for the oncology diagnostics market globally, and sold that company to Danaher and worked there for a short time. And then for 5 years in venture capital, and learned a lot there, obviously, about structuring transactions, doing due diligence, lots of different therapeutic areas. Been invested across both biotech and also medtech, and then left there and co-founded my first startup company, which was with some technology licensed from Harvard University into a company in Australia. Again, that was actually in the diagnostics field, and sold that company in 2015. And then, as you said, started to do some work in the cell therapy field. And that's what brought me to the US, and did a licensing transaction with the Fred Hutch and out-licensed from them phase 2B program, cell therapy drug, and worked there for a period of time. And as you started off, did some more recent work, back in licensing and business development, and that's what brought together Visus. I was working with a couple of companies and met Rob Sambursky, actually, who's a board certified ophthalmologist also, and been working on a number of technologies, and was able to bring those into Visus to co-found that company with Rob and Brett back in October 2019. So I've had a range of operating experiences in both good sized but also smaller companies, but also a good range of capital raising and sort of corporate transactional work, which is necessary, in early stage businesses to get them going and to bring in the assets and find good partnerships. So a good range of experiences to bring me to where I am now.
Yeah, congratulations on all the developments recently with Visus. But, you obviously have a tremendous interest, but also background in life sciences. And, I love it when a company takes the next stage and leap, which is where you're at now. They bring actual official seasoned leader to take the technology. And congratulations to Red Schiffman, who was, those of you who don't know, is a brilliant MD, who's actually ends up, who's their CMO, but also head of research and development. But also, to everybody you've brought on. I mean, you're scaling a little company. I could give a shout out to Carrie, who connected us. which is great.
Absolutely.
We had a great time in Vegas. A lot of hard work there. For those of you who didn't go, ASCRS, we had a great time there. I think I'm still recovering.
So am I.
It's like burning the candle on both ends.
That's it. That's it. Very, very light touchdowns in the evening, right? And then you're up in the morning again, and scooting around at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. So it's a long series of days, but some great connections. Great, obviously great meetings, great networking. Good to see people back in person. So that was a really good conference recently. Absolutely.
You guys, and you did, what for those ophthalmologists that don't know the company, what you've really done well, and for someone who's really supported the venture ecosystem for over the last 10 years, I really enjoy seeing companies like yours really with the right team, putting together the right KOLs, but really bringing in new insight, from, Dr. Burke and, bringing in people like Tim, and it's just really just wonderful to see, because I think at the end of the day, you agree with this, it's all about your team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, there are a lot of good, let me call them, inventions, innovations, out there within universities from inventors. And it takes, I think, some early, people who identify those and bring them into a company and get that formation going. And then that enables you, if you have some good assets and good people, you can attract some good capital, and then you somewhat get that flywheel turning, right? So then you attract more good people with that capital, and you find some other technologies that are obviously worth pursuing. And again, I sort of think about it as this flywheel. Once you get going and you keep on building both good, excellent people within your team, but also good capital partners, that enables you to, again, both find, identify, and bring on board the best assets to work on and develop, high quality drugs that have a big impact. So it's always wonderful to get going. It's even better to be expanding the team and start to fill out all those different roles that we need. So far, we've expanded rapidly. Actually, even just recently, we had, I think, 9 or 10 people at the end of last year. I think now we're up to 24, 25. So we've hired a good number of people in the first half of this year to be working on our pipeline, in addition to the expansion of our clinical ops team to be working on Brimacol. So yeah, I agree completely with you. Expanding the team and hiring good people is actually an absolute pleasure, and obviously necessary to keep growing, but a pleasure to see them come on board and work with other people within the company, but start to add value from the get-go. It's great to see and great to have those people on board.
And I love what I really have enjoyed about what you've done is just beyond the team is the molecule. I mean, you've got a unique molecule that it can last up to 8 hours. And when we looked at that data, you and I talked about this, is your phase 2 trials, you're showing the endpoints, safety, efficacy, but also just that most patients want the duration is really important for them, because I think that allows for them to have the best therapeutic outcomes, but also just they don't want to have loss of distance acuity. Tell me what's unique about Brimacol, and then tell me also, what's your thoughts on your pipeline? Yeah.
So Brimacol is a really unique entrant into this presbyopia correcting eye drop, category. So it's a combination of 2 well-known ophthalmic APIs. So brimonidine, tartrate, and carbachol. And carbachol obviously induces miosis, and you would know that well, and it's still sold today as Myostat to induce miosis immediately, during surgery in an injectable format, but used to be sold obviously as isoptocarbachol, many years ago, and was sold like that for decades actually. And then brimonidine still today obviously is marketed by Allergan as Alphagan P, but also marketed by Bausch as Lumify in low concentration. So we're bringing those 2 compounds together in a formulated eye drop. And we went through a number of studies last year, and we have a large number of clinical studies which were conducted prior to Visus acquiring the patents that underpin this formulation. And since we acquired those patents, we went through some formulation changes last year and some PK/PD studies in rabbits. And we now have a lead candidate in the clinic, which is 2.75% carbachol and 0.1% brimonidine with 100 parts per million of BAK. So that's Brimacol, and that will give an extended duration. And I'll get onto some of the clinical data in a second. And then as we made public for the first time at Accelerator last week on the Thursday, we also have a preservative-free formulation in development, which we've termed Brimacol F. And that's the same concentrations of carbachol and brimonidine, but without the BAK. So we have those 2 formulations under study right now in this phase 2. But prior clinical studies, multiple clinical studies out of the 6 that had been completed prior to us again acquiring the patents, multiple studies had shown a long and durable response in both phakic and pseudophakic patients, actually, up to 8 hours and beyond. One study in 2019 showed a long and durable response after 12 hours in patients, an improvement, I think, of mean 5 line improvement after 12 hours in those patients at a higher concentration, 3% carbachol and 0.2% brimonidine. But really, with all of that prior clinical data and the changes we've made, we have a lot of confidence of where we're taking, obviously, these 2 formulations. I guess what makes the combination really unique is obviously the addition of brimonidine to carbachol being the miotic agent. And brimonidine, as we know, whitens the eyes. We know that a straight cholinergic agent, a straight miotic, can create some hyperemia. So we expect to lessen that, obviously, with the addition of brimonidine. We have some data from a PK study we did last year that shows that in the presence of brimonidine, there's about 50% more carbachol in the iris ciliary body. And so what we're showing there is that brimonidine improves that durability of carbachol in again, creating that miotic effect and that pinhole effect. And then we also know from some prior data that the combination of these 2 provides no change in IOP. Sometimes we know that a straight cholinergic can create a change in intraocular pressure, but we're not seeing that with this combination, which is great. And we also know that, again, brimonidine can reduce any spasming of the ciliary muscles. So we expect to see maybe some reduction potentially in headache and brow ache, plus no loss in distance visual acuity, no myopic shift. So really, it's the combination. The benefit of brimonidine is multifold, as I've just highlighted, but it is a strong contributor to this durable response we're seeing in patients. And to your other point about duration, we've completed a number of fairly large market research studies now. And time again, duration is the key feature that we're hearing from patients and also doctors that they want to see in a presbyopia correcting eye drop. And we think that's going to be a key defining part of products that are obviously coming down the pipeline and through to market.
Well, that's great. I think the sweet spot is 8 hours. I think that's going to be the key and not losing distance vision as a clinician.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this before we jump into your pipeline. How would a patient get their hands on it? Let's say this flash forward, you have this available. Would they go see their optometrist? How do you, as a CEO, I know we're jumping the gun a little bit, but let's talk about that because I think it touches on your market data a little bit. Like, how is the patient with telemedicine? Can we set up something where they don't have to come in? And most of them are healthy individuals. They probably don't want to see their ophthalmologist, or they've probably never seen an ophthalmologist. Maybe they see the optometrist occasionally. But let's face it, they're like me. They're getting older. They can't read their book for a 5-year-old. And they want to see the best, but necessarily probably are too busy to go see somebody. How do they get this medication?
Yeah, really good question. So you've touched on a few topics here, and this is, I think, what's going to be a really exciting wave of new interactions between patients and doctors. If you take an ametrope now, in their late 40s or early 50s, a lot of those prospective patients have never seen an eye care, doctor in their life. And they really haven't had any need to, and then they develop presbyopia and they go and buy a pair of readers, cheap pair of readers, or, maybe they get a nice pair of frames or something. And in time, they obviously, might do that consultation. But a lot of those patients aren't going to get the right kind of eye care that they need. And there could be some undiagnosed cases in there, obviously, of other, other indications and other conditions that the patients have. And so, I've in interacting with a number of different, doctors over the last 6 months, KOLs over the last 6 months, we've heard and we can see that, this could be a drug that helps to bring patients into the clinic. In the end, it could be something that obviously, because patients are going to want to learn from this through marketing and advertising, obviously they're going to want to learn about this and they're going to need to go and have an eye exam done. It's going to bring them into the clinic when they wouldn't have otherwise done that, which is novel and obviously is good for the industry in general. In terms of your question on digital health, can you do a telehealth type of exam? Again, through I guess conversations we've had, that's one potential. So it may be that you do some sort of telehealth exam to do a first consult. Maybe you provide a prescription for a month, and then you say, you know what, after a month, I'd like to come and have you come in person and do a follow-up after the first month. So you provide a prescription for the drug. Patient picks up the drug from pharmacy, uses it for a month, likes it, and then actually returns for an in-person consult, say after the first month. That sort of model we've heard, again, from interactions we've had. Certainly, I think there will be a large telehealth component to this. This is obviously an indication that you can diagnose remotely. And so I think that will be a component to this. How you then link that in to again an in-person consultation, what time frame, and how do you bring that in? Again, we've had a number of different conversations as to how that might work. But yes, I see that as being a part of this. And again, I see this as being overall very positive for industry, because I think that it will bring patients who otherwise do not see any sort of eye care provider, either optometrist or ophthalmologist. And now they will be making those visits to learn about this whole new category of eye drops. And I think that's incredibly exciting. That gives them better eye care and obviously opens up the industry further for other other treatments potentially too.
Yeah, so let's talk about that's a great segue. So we're working on the VTI-003, which is a peptide we talked about in Las Vegas. And obviously, what you can probably just kind of give the synopsis of what's already out there about what you're working on without opening up kimono too much. So maybe you can enlighten the folks that are out there that you do have a pipeline. This is actually a real company. You're not just a one-off, and I think that's pretty exciting. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so what we have made public is obviously we have our lead program in presbyopia. We have some other assets in the company. A little bit of that we have made public at this point in time, and some more we will be making public through this later in the quarter. But to Herstatin, which again we have been talking about, and we actually had some nice data, some preclinical data, which we just got from some early studies just last week. Is a class of peptides, Herstatin peptides. They're naturally occurring salivary peptides, so they exist in the mouth of humans and non-human primates. They're thought to be somewhat responsible for some of the accelerated wound healing that we see in oral cavity. And Herstatin 1 has got fairly well documented wound healing capability, and through to Herstatin 5 with again well-documented antimicrobial activity. And so we have a large patent estate around a number of different bodies of research in again showing accelerated wound healing for these Herstatin peptides. And so what we can see is that potentially this could accelerate healing after potentially something like PRK, for instance. It could be used for different forms of ocular surface disease. So we've got a number of different indications that we are looking at along that, let's call it, in a wound healing envelope, and evaluating that right now internally in the company based on some data that again we just got last week, which we'll be making public fairly shortly. But suffice to say, I see probably at least one, maybe maybe 2 to 3, but at least one and upward from that, formulation and ultimate drug, likely topical, coming out of this Herstatin research. And again, we were pretty excited to again share some of this, obviously confidentially, last week at ASCRS with some of our advisory board and get their feedback, and that will help steer the direction of our development. But there'll be some more on that. Let me just say later in the quarter when we start to make a bit more of that public. But yes, we do have a pipeline, and very excited to actually unveil quite a bit of that in the coming month or so.
Congratulations. I think having you've been there since 19, they've done such tremendous heavy lifting. And, for me, at the end of the day, it's a huge market, huge unmet need, and huge opportunity. There's going to be plenty of business for everybody. I'm so excited that you're there and you're focusing everybody, and you have a great team. Tell us a little bit about you. I know who you are now is not who you were 20 years ago. Part of right?
I've got less hair. I'm roughly the same height. I've shrunk a little bit too.
Well, you look good. You look good. It's funny because internally, I think you and I talked when we had dinner, and it's like we probably think we're like in our 20s probably.
I still feel like I'm in my 20s. Yeah.
I did too. But how have you evolved, and what would you tell a 20-year-old who has aspirations to become like you? What are some things that you would like to talk about? When define it as legacy or coaching or whatever you want to call it. What are some things that would you attribute your success to that that are really not well understood, and what are your key elements to success in your career?
Yeah. So I think if you want to, if you do end up, if your career objective is to, is to be in an early stage company, to start an early stage company and run it, be the CEO and a senior leader in a business like that. But to co-found something and be the CEO and run it, I think it's important. It's not necessary, and there are people who don't do this or have this, but I think it's important to have some degree of operating experience. So there are some people who do a lot of research, and they take their research and spin that out of a university or college and do very, very well, and grow companies all the way through to selling them and are incredibly successful. And there are other people, as we know, stories like Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook in his dorm room and everything else. So that happens too. But I think on the whole, having an understanding of the different components of business and actually having some operating roles within business and running projects or running a marketing function or being in sales or whatever, but understanding how the different functions of business work, is important. And I got quite a bit of that, in an earlier stage company, which grew quite rapidly and then became quite a big, company before it was sold. Having that growth experience through a number of different roles was good for me and gave me some good grounding in both what it is to be smaller, but then go through growth and how you scale, quickly and still make sure you're delivering quality product. I think it's really important to think always about the customer, and also not just the customer or the patient, but also to follow, let me call it sort of follow the money. So you need to be developing things that are important, for the patient or for the doctor, whoever your end customer is going to be, and make sure you really, really understand their needs and spend a lot of time in market research. I'm always a big believer in spending money on market research. We spend quite a reasonable amount of money on market research as a smaller company, but we've done a lot of different research studies. And you mentioned Kerry earlier. She's been, really important in spearheading a lot of that. But to me, as you get more research data, it's always important to take that and then ask yourself, well, what does that mean for what we thought the product was for our target product profile? What does that mean? Does it change it at all in terms of the preclinical or clinical data? But then you should go back out to the market and do some more research based on that too. So it shouldn't just be a thing that you do first, but it should be a continuum that you're doing all the time in learning about the market. Make sure you're addressing those needs, and also just understand how the money flows through whatever product or service you're developing. Who's going to pay? How are they going to pay? Are they going to be happy with the price that you think you're going to need? And make sure that you're accounting for the different groups that are involved. If it's a surgical device you're developing, who's actually going to be buying that, and who's going to be making that decision in the practice, and have you really spoken to them about how they think about it? So I guess I learned a lot early on in my career, and I'd encourage people to spend some time either working closely with people in marketing or spend some time doing that directly to understand that piece. A lot of technologists I've met over time haven't understood the market piece well, and so I think that's a really important thing. Have a mentor, through different stages in my life. I've had a good mentor either formally or informally, but it's always really valuable to have someone who has had different lessons to you, has a different network to you, and can provide an open door for you to either help open up your network or just be a sounding board at times. And it's tough to try and solve every problem yourself and deal with every issue yourself. So it's useful to have one or two or a group of people that are independent of you and confidential to talk to about to things that you experience. So again, I think that's important, and important to always try and have, again, one to a few people who you can turn to either formally or informally to be doing that. Now, I guess the final thing, I've touched on a lot here, but I guess the final thing is two last things maybe, I guess, as lessons. If you do want to be in early stage, having some exposure, either through, in my own experience, working in venture capital, which was hugely valuable for me to just understand the process of raising capital, doing, valuations, doing due diligence. How does a VC think about due diligence, et cetera? Having that experience has been useful for me, but you don't have to do that directly. But having some appreciation for what an investor is looking for and getting that learning from someone, I think is important if you want to be in the earlier stage, game. And then finally, I think, you need to have, some tenacity and to really to really dig in and persevere with something that you believe in and go for it. And, if you've got some great skills and great talents, obviously you can go back and, find another role in the future if you don't succeed, and you're not always going to succeed. But if you really want to create something, build something, it's going to take a lot of tenacity and perseverance. So I guess that's a collection of things that I've learned and that I would communicate to my younger self to learn some of those lessons quicker. So, yeah.
Those are great pearls. And, I wish we had more time to spend, and we'll bring you back on as a company matures and you're going through your iterations of your data, and just so much great wealth. For those of you listening or watching this podcast, that, I would really pause in the last 5 minutes, and, that's, they say you'll be the same person, the same future, and the only thing that changes is the people you'll meet and the books you read. And I would probably add the podcast you listen to, because I think that really helps me really learn about all the things that you said. And I think it's critical, because you don't teach you that stuff. Certainly medical school didn't teach you that stuff, and even in my kids now, I look at them, the same archaic school system is placed. They have great schools and they've modernized, but really at the end of the day, all of this stuff really comes down to all the pearls you talked about, is like collaboration and really making sure you're listening to everybody. And I think a lot of that is vital. And it's so many entrepreneurs that I meet that they get married to their own idea and they don't listen to market research. Your market research might tell you to hang a hard left, and you don't do that. And as you know, that could be devastating to a company. So pleasure, Ben, having you, and I look forward to seeing you again live. And I hope you guys stay safe out there with the Delta wave.
Yeah, you too. And I guess to everyone who's watching and listening, stay safe. Let's hope we move beyond this. And we, as I said at the start of this, before we got onto this, we've changed some policies internally to make sure that we can keep all of our employees safe and well, and their loved ones. So to everyone, stay safe, keep moving forward, but do so with some caution. So thank you for having me. Appreciate the time. Look forward to coming back on at some future point.
Absolutely, Ben. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you for listening, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the OIS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our iTunes channel so you don't miss any ophthalmology insights. Got a story of your own to tell? Apply to be a guest at OIS.net.